20 years ago, the heiress to the sterling fortune decided I was too poor for her. She took the baby in her belly and married the hottest CEO on the market. I walked away with nothing, burying my name and my past in the middle of nowhere. This Christmas Eve, that so-called son of mine suddenly called. His tone was pure charity. "Hey, Mom's feeling generous. She says you can come over for Christmas dinner." I laughed, speaking into the receiver with a flat voice. "Watch your mouth. If you need something, ask your CEO father. I'm out of your league." Less than half an hour after I hung up, my rotting wooden front door was kicked open. My ex-wife stood there, flanked by fully armed private security contractors. Her eyes were red as she pointed a manicured finger at me. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Tie this old man up and drag him back." The snow was falling hard. The wind whistled through the cracks in the cabin's windows, carrying snowflakes that made the flames in my wood stove flicker. The burner phone on the table buzzed. It was a strange number, area code New York City. I picked it up. "Hello." My voice was raspy. I hadn't spoken all day. The other end was silent for a few seconds before a young, arrogant voice came through. "Is this Jack Miller?" "Spit out." I tossed a log into the stove. The person on the other end seemed choked by my attitude. He paused, then adopted a tone that sounded like he was handing out a favor. "I am died at avance." My hand froze in midair, holding the firewood. "Tyler Vance. My son, legally speaking. 20 years ago, when I left with nothing but the clothes on my back, he was still in Evelyn's womb." "Oh." I threw the wood into the fire, watching the flames jump. "Mom's in a good mood today. We're having a family dinner, and she told me to invite you." His voice carried a trace of impatience, as if notifying me was the greatest kindness he could bestow. "I'll text you the address. Call yourself an Uber." I laughed. It was a laugh of pure anger. Christmas dinner. 20 years later, the first time they remember me is on a night meant for families, using that high and mighty tone. "Hey, did you hear me?" He seemed to think I should be groveling in gratitude and rush me. That "hey" felt like a needle pricking my heart. Not painful, just irritating. I grabbed my old coat off the chair, draped it over my shoulders, and walked to the window to look at the white expanse outside. "Watch your mouth," I said, my voice faint. "If you need something, go find your CEO, Daddy. I'm out of your league." "Excuse me?" Tyler's voice instantly turned cold. "Jack Miller, don't be ungrateful. My mother asking you to come is an honor. You're just a hillbilly." I hung up the phone. The world was quiet again. I poured myself a cup of hot tea. It was stale tea from last year, a bit bitter. Outside, apart from the wind and snow, there was silence. I had lived with this silence for 20 years. It was fine. I had just finished half the cup when the ear-splitting roar of engines cut through the air outside the yard. It wasn't just one car. The sound grew louder until it stopped right outside my flimsy fence. The headlights were blinding, turning my torn paper shades a ghastly white. I frowned and stood up. Then came the uniform, heavy footsteps crunching on the snow. There were a lot of them. Before I could even reach the door, bang, my wooden door was kicked in from the outside. The two panels flew inward. One smashed onto the table, shattering my teacup. The other hit the wall and bounced back. The freezing wind, mixed with snow, rushed into the room like a madman, instantly suppressing the fire in the stove to a dim red glow. The doorway was packed with people, all in black tactical gear, faces covered by balaclavas, holding weapons that looked expensive and dangerous. They stood like statues, radiating a cold aura. A woman in a white mink coat walked in through their ranks. Her high heels stepped on the broken door panel with a sharp clack. It was Evelyn Sterling. 20 years without seeing her, and she barely seemed to have changed. Still beautiful, still commanding that powerful presence. Only the fine lines at the corners of her eyes betrayed the passage of time. Her eyes were red as she stared at me, filled with rage, unwillingness, and something else I couldn't quite place. "Jack Miller," she said, her voice colder than the storm outside. "I gave you a chance to do this the easy way." She didn't wait for me to answer, just waved her hand at the man behind her. "Tie this old thing up and bring him." Two men in black immediately moved toward me. They were fast, hesitating at nothing, like precision machines. I didn't fight back. I knew it was useless. I just looked at Evelyn, the woman I had once loved. 20 years ago, she had stood before me just like this, using that same unquestionable tone. "Jack, let's get a divorce." "Why?" I had asked. "I'm pregnant, but the baby isn't yours." She looked me in the eye, articulating every word. "I'm going to marry Richard Vance. He can give the child a bright future. You can't." Richard Vance, the CEO of the hottest real estate firm at the time. Overnight, I went from husband to ex-husband, from an expectant father to a joke. I didn't take a dime from her. I packed some old clothes and left the home I had renovated with my own hands. I thought I'd never see her again in this lifetime. I certainly didn't expect it to be like this. The men grabbed my arms left and right. Their grip was strong like iron clamps. One of them pulled out a black zip tie to bind my hands. "No need," I said, my voice calm. "I can walk." The men paused and looked at Evelyn. Evelyn's gaze lingered on my patched old coat for a second, a flash of disdain crossing her eyes. "Moo," she said just one word, then turned around. Escorted by the 2 guards, I followed behind her. 3 black SUVs were parked outside, looking completely out of place in my dilapidated yard. The vehicles were splattered with mud and slush. They had evidently driven here in a hurry. Evelyn got into the middle one. I was shoved into the last one. The door slammed shut, cutting off the wind and snow. The car was warm, but the air was stifling. Besides me, there were 4 guards sitting there like silent mountains. The convoy started, crushing the snow in the yard, and quickly drove onto the village road. I watched the scenery flying backward out the window, the familiar crooked trees, the neighbors' rooftops, all blurring into the night. I didn't know where they were taking me. Was it really a family dinner? Inviting someone to Christmas dinner this way? Evelyn's domineering nature really hadn't changed in 20 years. The cars moved fast and steady. About half an hour later, the convoy left the dirt roads and merged onto the highway. The neon lights on the roadside flashed by, illuminating my aged face. The intercom in the car buzzed. "Ms. Sterling, it's Tyler on the line. Put him through." Evelyn's voice came over the intercom, sounding exhausted. Soon, Tyler's voice rang out, carrying that same impatient tone. "Mom, did you get him? The doctors are waiting here. They've asked for updates like 3 times. "Doctors?" My heart skipped a beat. "Not a dinner? We're on our way. Tell him to shut up and wait." Evelyn's tone was nasty. "Don't yell at me. I'm not the one who told him to be difficult. Some hillbilly, giving him a little face, and he thinks he's somebody." Tyler complained on the other end. "Shut up." Evelyn snapped. "Be polite to him from now on. Do you hear me?" Yeah, whatever. Such a hassle." Tyler muttered and hung up. The car returned to silence. But my heart couldn't settle down. "Doctors, waiting," asked 3 times. Putting these words together gave me a bad feeling. They didn't go to all this trouble just for a meal. They needed me to do something only I could do. The car sped along, not stopping at any city landmarks. Finally, they pulled up in front of a heavily guarded gate. The gate opened slowly. Inside wasn't the mansion I expected, but a white complex. There was a Red Cross symbol on the roof. A hospital. A private hospital. The car drove directly into the underground garage. The door opened, and cold wind rushed in. I was let out. Evelyn and another young man were already waiting there. The young man was tall, dressed in designer clothes. His brows and eyes resembled Evelyn's, but his face was full of anxiety and disdain. That was Tyler Vance. He looked me up and down like I was a piece of merchandise. "Would have been easier if you just cooperated earlier. Had to make a whole scene." He spoke, making no attempt to hide the disgust in his voice. I ignored him. I looked at Evelyn and asked, "What exactly do you want?" Evelyn's lips moved as if she wanted to say something, but in the end, she just looked away. "Follow me." She led the way to a private elevator. Tyler and I followed, surrounded by the guards. Throughout the whole process, not a single doctor or nurse appeared, just our strange group. The elevator rose smoothly. In the confined space, the atmosphere grew heavier. Tyler seemed very uncomfortable being near me. He paced irritably, scrolling on his phone, the screen's light reflecting on his young but cold face. "You'll know when we get there," he said without looking up. "Don't try anything funny. It won't end well for you." I leaned against the cold elevator wall, watching the floor numbers tick up. My heart sank with every digit. I had a guess. What could make Evelyn so unhinged, Tyler so anxious, and require me specifically to solve it? Aside from blood, what else could it be? The elevator stopped at the 16th floor. Ding! The doors opened. Outside was a terrifyingly quiet corridor, bathed in stark white light. At the end of the hall, the door to a ward was open, emitting the faint hum and glow of medical machinery. A doctor in a white coat hurried over, looking serious. He glanced at me, then said to Evelyn, "Ms. Sterling, everything is ready. We're just waiting for the compatibility match." Compatibility match. I knew it. My gaze went past them, looking toward that room. A person lay on the hospital bed, covered in tubes, face as pale as paper. That face. It looked 70% like Tyler's, but much frielier. My brain buzzed. I had always assumed Tyler was my son. The child Evelyn was carrying 20 years ago. But now, looking at this, he wasn't. The one in the bed was. So who was Tyler? I snapped my head to look at Tyler. There was no worry on his face for the person in the bed, only impatience. As if that wasn't his brother, just a nuisance. What are you staring at? Tyler bristled under my gaze. Hurry up and go get blood. Don't waste time. Evelyn finally looked at me again. Her eyes were complicated to the extreme, pleading, commanding, and a trace of guilt. Jack, her voice was hoarse. Please, save him. Who is he? He's my son. Evelyn spoke with difficulty. His name is Ryan. He's Tyler's twin brother. Twins. My heart seized violently. 20 years ago, she told me the baby wasn't mine. Now, she shows up with 2 sons and asks me to save one. Only you can save him. Evelyn's tears finally fell. He has acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Chemotherapy failed. A bone marrow transplant is his only hope. None of us were a match, not even Tyler. She looked at me, enunciating every word. The doctor said, among immediate family, you're the only one left. I finally understood. I understood everything. They weren't here to invite me to Christmas dinner. They were here for my marrow, here to take my life's essence. I laughed. From the bottom of my heart, I felt it was absurd and pathetic. 20 years ago, I thought I had just been cheated on. Turns out, the betrayal was boundless. Twins. She was pregnant with twins, told me they weren't mine, and turned to throw herself into another man's arms. Now that one is sick and dying, she kidnapped me, crying and begging me to save him. The irony was suffocating. Begging me. I looked at Evelyn, repeating her words, my tone devoid of warmth. Ms. Sterling, did you forget how you invited me out of my house half an hour ago? My gaze swept over the memory of the kicked-in wooden door, the shattered teacup on the floor, and finally landed back on her tear-streaked face. You kicked down my door, kidnapped me, and now you want my bone marrow. Evelyn, have you spent the last 20 years bossing people around so much that you think you're entitled to anything you want? Evelyn's face went white, her lips trembling, unable to speak. Tyler, standing beside her, couldn't take it anymore. He stepped forward, pointing at my nose. Listen, old man, don't push your luck. My mom begging you is giving you respect. My brother is dying, and you're putting on airs. It's just bone marrow, right? Name your price. How much do you want? Money. I glanced at him, the contempt in my eyes making his face flush red and white. In your eyes, can everything be bought with money? Family, dignity, even life. I took a step forward, closing in on him. This young man, who was taller than me, actually took a half step back under my stare. Let me ask you, 20 years ago, when your family swept me out like trash, did you give me money? When I was eating scraps in the country with nothing to my name, did you send money? For 20 years, you didn't give a damn about me. Now that you need my marrow, you want to buy it? How much do you think my marrow is worth? $1 million? 10 million? $1 billion? My voice wasn't loud, but every word was a nail driven into their hearts. Tyler was struck dumb. He had probably never thought about these things. In his eyes, I was just a loser who had leached off their family and been discarded. Jack! Evelyn finally found her voice. She stepped forward, blocking Tyler, her voice trembling. I wronged you back then. I had my reasons. But Ryan is innocent. He's only 20. He can't just die like this. He's innocent, so I deserve this? I asked coldly. The corridor fell into a dead silence. The bodyguards in black all lowered their heads, as if afraid to witness this high society scandal. The doctor in the white coat stood nearby, stuck in an awkward position. After a long time, I took a deep breath, suppressing the turmoil in my heart. I looked at the unconscious son I had never met in the ward. My feelings were indescribably complex. That was my blood. Whether I admitted it or not, that fact couldn't change. To save or not to save. Reason told me I had no obligation. They were ruthless to me. Why should I be righteous to them? But that was a life. My gaze moved from Ryan's pale face back to Evelyn's pleading eyes. You want me to save him? Fine. I finally spoke. Evelyn and Tyler's eyes instantly erupted with ecstatic light. But my voice turned, becoming incredibly cold. I have conditions. What conditions? Say it. We'll pay anything. Tyler said eagerly, as if afraid I'd change my mind. I ignored him, staring only at Evelyn, speaking word by word. My first condition is simple. Tell me exactly why you lied to me back then, why you left me, and why you hid the truth about the children. Tell the whole story, right here, in front of your precious son. Don't leave out a single word. As my words fell, Evelyn's face turned even paler than Ryan's. She looked at me in disbelief, as if she hadn't expected such a condition. She opened her mouth, her eyes darting panic toward Tyler, then quickly looking away. Tyler was stunned too. He frowned, impatiently urging, "Mom, just tell him. What kind of condition is that? Just say it, and let's go." To him, this was just some irrelevant old history. To save his brother's life, what couldn't be said? He didn't understand that for Evelyn, this was a scar she desperately wanted to keep hidden, especially from him. Evelyn bit her lip hard, her body trembling slightly. I watch her leisurely, leaning against the cold wall, crossing my arms. "It seems Ms. Sterling isn't willing," I said faintly. "Makes sense. After all, as the Sterling heiress and CEO Vance's wife, how could you let outsiders know about your shameful past? In that case, forget it." Saying that, I turned as if to leave. "Wait!" Evelyn screamed, rushing over and grabbing my arm tightly. I'll say it, okay?" Her nails dug into my flesh, her strength surprising. I stopped and looked back at her. She took a deep breath, as if making a resolution, slowly closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, her gaze was dead gray. "Tyler." She didn't look at me, but at Tyler, her voice raspy like sandpaper. "Haven't you always asked me why you and your brother don't look alike, and why your health is so different?" Tyler froze. "Mom, why bring that up now?" "Because," Evelyn struggled with every word, "because you and Ryan, although you are twins, your fathers, are not the same person." "What?" Tyler looked like he'd been struck by lightning. He was completely stunned. Not just him, even I was stunned. I had imagined countless possibilities, but never this. Twins, different fathers? Back then, Jack and I, we were very much in love. But my father, your grandfather, he always looked down on him, thought he was useless, couldn't give me the lifestyle I needed. Evelyn's voice was low, like she was sleepwalking. Later, my father gave me an ultimatum. I had to break up with him and marry Richard Vance to merge our companies. I refused. He used some methods. Once at a gala, I got drunk. When I woke up, I was in Richard's bed. Tyler's face was bloodless. His eyes were wide, mouth open, but no sound came out. Later, I found out I was pregnant. I went for a checkup, and the doctor said it was twins. But I didn't know whose babies they were. At that time, my father threatened Jack's family to force me to marry Richard. I had no way out. I could only. She closed her eyes in pain. I could only lie to Jack, tell him the baby wasn't his, so he would give up completely. I married Richard and gave birth to you two. Later, we did a paternity test. The result was, Ryan is Jack's son, and you are Richard's. Boom. The last string in Tyler's brain snapped. He staggered back 2 steps, hitting the wall, staring at us with hollow eyes. It turned out the hillbilly he had despised for 20 years was his twin brother's biological father. And he, himself, was the child his mother bore from another man while she wasn't sober. His proud lineage instantly became a massive joke. After saying all this, Evelyn seemed drained of all strength, collapsing to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. In the entire corridor, only her crying and the monotonous beeping of the machines remained. I looked at this melodramatic tragedy unfolding before me. I felt no joy, only a desolate chill. This was the woman I had loved for half my life. This was the truth I had sought for 20 years. I walked up to Tyler. He stood there like a puppet, his eyes unfocused. "Now, do you still think your birth is so noble?" I asked calmly. He didn't answer. His body just slid slowly down the wall until he hit the floor. I stopped looking at them and walked straight to the doctor who had been standing by. "Doctor?" "Huh? Mr. Miller, what can I do for you?" The doctor was clearly shaken by the massive amount of information, stammering a bit. I pointed at Ryan in the ward, then at myself. "Right now, immediately, arrange for my compatibility test." Then, I turned back, looking at Evelyn collapsed on the floor and the soul-crushed Tyler, and stated my second condition. "Before all my test results are out, and before I decide whether to donate, you two are not allowed to step into this ward, not allowed to speak to me, and not allowed to appear in front of me. From now on, everything here goes my way." The doctor paused, then looked at Evelyn on the floor, looking troubled. "But Ms. Sterling." "No buts." I cut him off, my gaze sharp as a knife. "You are a doctor. Your duty is to save lives. Right now, that patient's only hope is me. If you still want to save him, do as I say. Otherwise, I leave now." My tone brokered no argument. The doctor weighed the pros and cons. It took only a second for him to decide. He nodded heavily at me. "All right, Mr. Miller, I understand. I'll immediately arrange for a nurse to take you for tests. There's a lounge over here, you can." "No lounge." I pointed to the companion room next to the ward. "I'll stay right there. Convenient to check on his condition. Also, give me a smartphone with internet access and prepare professional literature on acute lymphoblastic leukemia and bone marrow transplants. The more detailed, the better. The doctor froze again. He probably didn't expect a man who looked like a rural farmer to make such professional and calm demands. The slight dismissiveness in his eyes vanished completely, replaced by scrutiny and respect. Of course, Mr. Miller. I'll handle it immediately. He finished and quickly called a nurse over, whispering instructions. The nurse walked up to me respectfully. Mr. Miller, please follow me. I nodded and followed her to the phlebotomy room. From start to finish, I didn't look at Evelyn or Tyler again. Behind me, Evelyn's crying gradually stopped, replaced by a deathly silence. I knew they were left in that long corridor like two prisoners awaiting sentencing. And I, from a kidnapped prisoner, had transformed into the one holding the gavel. Blood draws, lab tests, a series of tedious checks proceeded in an orderly fashion. I was very cooperative, showing no resistance. The nurses and doctors treated me with extreme respect, treading carefully, afraid to upset me. I knew this was on Evelyn's or the doctor's orders. They were afraid I'd run. In between checks, I was settled into the luxury suite next door. The room was huge, fully equipped, infinitely better than my drafty cabin. Soon, the doctor personally brought me a brand new smartphone and a tablet preloaded with massive amounts of medical literature. Mr. Miller, everything you asked for is here. The matching results will take a few hours. You can rest. Ring the bell if you need anything. Okay, thanks. I nodded. After the doctor left, I closed the door and sat on the soft sofa. For the first time in 20 years, I was using such high-end electronics. I didn't check the news or contact anyone. I opened the tablet and began reading the leukemia data word for word. From pathology to treatment plans, to the transplant process, risks, and the impact on the donor's body. I needed to understand everything clearly. I couldn't fight a battle unprepared. Time ticked by. I immersed myself in the complex medical terminology, feeling like I was back in my youth studying for college exams. I didn't know how much time passed before there was a gentle knock on the door. I looked up. It was the attending physician. He stood at the door, looking excited, clutching a lab report. Mr. Miller, his voice trembled slightly with emotion. The results. The results are in. I put down the tablet and looked at him calmly. Speak. It's a perfect match. Full HLA match. 10 out of 10 points. You are the perfect donor. Ryan can be saved. He can really be saved. The doctor was almost incoherent. I nodded. This result was within my expectations. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Outside was the brilliant night view of New York City, lights stretching out like stars. Behind me, separated by a wall, was my biological son fighting the Reaper. At the other end of the hall were the woman who had deceived me for 20 years and the young man who was nominally Richard's son, anxiously awaiting my judgment. I picked up the phone and dialed the doctor. Get Evelyn and Tyler to the door of the ward. Now, let's talk about the third condition. Less than 5 minutes after hanging up, there was a knock on the suite door. I didn't make a sound. The person outside didn't knock again, just waited quietly. I deliberately finished my glass of warm water, stood up, and opened the door. Evelyn and Tyler stood there like two students waiting for the principal's punishment. Evelyn's eyes were swollen, her face haggard, her mink coat looking absurdly out of place. Tyler's head was low, eyes dodging, afraid to look at me. His former pride and disdain were gone. Mr. Miller. The attending doctor stood a bit further away, smiling awkwardly at me. I ignored him, looking only at the mother and son. Ready? I asked. Evelyn jerked her head up, lips trembling, and nodded heavily. Good. I stepped aside, clearing the doorway, so they could clearly see the figure surrounded by machines in the ward. My third condition has 3 steps. My voice was exceptionally clear in the empty corridor and exceptionally cold. First, Evelyn. I called her name, looking into her eyes. You, right now, right here, get on your knees. For the deception 20 years ago, for the 20 years of neglect for kicking down my door today. Kowtow and apologize to me, and to your son in that bed. As soon as the words fell, Tyler snapped his head up, eyes full of shock and humiliation. He wanted to say something, but Evelyn grabbed him. Evelyn's body shook violently, but she just stared at me, her eyes a mix of despair and pleading. I met her gaze without expression. Second, I didn't give her room to breathe, continuing, for 20 years Ryan, as my son, should have been raised by me. Your Sterling and Vance families took away my rights, and owe him 20 years of fatherly love and support. I don't want your money for myself, but this debt must be settled. I want you to set up a trust fund. The amount? Calculate it based on the standard of living of your precious heir, Tyler. over the last 20 years. Not a penny less. This fund will be used for Ryan's treatment and life. And the sole trustee is me. You only have the obligation to deposit money. You have no right to speak. Tyler's face went completely white. This condition wasn't just about money. It was another denial and humiliation of his status. Evelyn gritted her teeth tight enough to draw blood, but she nodded. I agree. Her voice was barely audible. Very good. I looked at her, finally showing a sliver of a smile, though it held no warmth. Step 3. The most important step. My gaze moved from Evelyn to Tyler's face, which mixed anger, unwillingness, and fear. Call your CEO Daddy, Richard Vance. Tell him to come here personally and beg me. My words were like a bomb detonating in the hallway. Tyler shook all over, as if hearing a fantasy. He cried out, impossible. You wish. My dad, he what? I interrupted him coldly. Is he God? Is he the emperor? Doesn't he like solving problems with money and power? Now, here's a problem. Let him solve it himself. My gaze returned to Evelyn. Or, you make the call. Evelyn swayed, nearly losing her balance. Making her call Richard, making him come beg her ex-husband. It was worse than killing her. She knew exactly what kind of man Richard Vance was. That man valued his face more than his life. But she looked at Ryan, whose vitals were weak in the ward, then at my face, hard as iron. She knew she had no choice. Tyler was still struggling beside her. His pride, the worldview he had built over 20 years, was being smashed to pieces today. Making his lofty father bow to this hillbilly he despised, he couldn't accept it. Mom, you can't. Enough. Evelyn suddenly snapped. She turned and slapped Tyler hard across the face. The crisp sound echoed in the quiet corridor. Tyler clutched his face, completely stunned. This was the first time in his life Evelyn had ever hit him. If you want your brother to live, shut your mouth. Evelyn screamed hoarsely, tears breaking the dam again. After shouting, she seemed drained of all energy. She turned to face me, no struggle left in her eyes, only numb submission. She straightened her messy hair and clothes, as if trying to salvage a shred of pitiful dignity. Then, under the shocked gazes of Tyler and the doctor, her knees buckled, and she knelt straight down in front of me. Jack! She looked up, tears streaking her well-preserved face. I am sorry. Her forehead hit the cold, polished tiles heavily with a muffled thud. I apologize for my selfishness and cowardice 20 years ago. Thud. Another heavy bow. I apologize for owing you and Ryan for 20 years. Thud. I apologize for disrespecting and offending you today. 3 bows, heavy and solid. When she lifted her head, her forehead was red and swollen, even bleeding slightly. I watched her quietly, feeling no ripple in my heart. This wasn't the thrill of revenge. It was just a judgment delayed by 20 years. What she owed me, what she owed Ryan, repayment was only just beginning. I didn't say get up, nor did I look at her again. I just extended my hand. Make the call. I spat out 3 cold words. Evelyn trembled as she fished her phone out of her expensive bag. She found that number she knew by heart, her finger hovering over the dial button for a long time before finally pressing it. The call connected. She put on speaker. A man's voice, magnetic but extremely impatient, came through. What is it now? You haven't fixed this little issue yet? I said, just pay whatever he wants. Richard. Evelyn's voice was humble as dust. It's not about money. Can you come to the hospital? Go to the hospital? I am Busse. I have international meetings waiting. Evelyn, my patience is limited. Don't let a bastard's life interrupt my business. He's not a bastard. Evelyn screamed. He is my son. Hey, your son. On the other end, Richard laughed coldly. Don't forget, your son is Tyler. That sick invalid is just proof of your shame back then. Whether he lives or dies has nothing to do with me. Listening to Richard's ruthless words, Tyler swayed, his face looking worse than a corpse. The blood drained from Evelyn's face. Holding onto a final sliver of hope, she begged, Richard, I beg you, please come. Jack, he demands you come personally and beg him before he'll save Ryan. Silence on the other end. A long, deathly silence. Seconds later, Richard's voice returned. This time, it sounded like it was dredged from an ice cellar, carrying a grim, murderous intent. He has a death wish. Send me the address. The call ended. Evelyn collapsed like a pile of mud, the phone slipping from her hand and shattering its screen on the floor. The killing intent in Richard's last sentence chilled her to the bone. She knew things had spiraled completely out of her control. A bigger storm was coming. Tyler stood nearby, soul lost. Richard's words, your son is Tyler, and proof of shame, made him thoroughly understand his and Ryan's status in that man's heart. One was a tool to inherit the business. The other was a burden to be discarded at any time. I bent down, picked up the phone with the cracked screen, and tossed it into a nearby trash can. "Doctor," I looked at the attending physician. "Here, Mr. Miller." The doctor flinched and answered quickly. "Clear the floor," I said faintly. "Except for necessary nurses. I don't want to see any idlers around my son's ward. Also, tell hospital security to look alive. I'm afraid someone might cause trouble here later." "Understood. I'll arrange it immediately." The doctor dared not delay, immediately using his radio to give orders. Soon, several nurses came over, half supporting, half dragging the dazed Evelyn and Tyler to a distant waiting room. The entire VIP section on the 16th floor was instantly cleared, leaving only me and the ticking of the instruments in the ward. I returned to my suite, closed the door, and continued reading my materials. As if everything outside had nothing to do with me. I was waiting for Richard Vance, the man I had heard of but never met for 20 years. Waiting for the man who stole everything from me, whose throat I was about to throttle. About 40 minutes later, a commotion came from downstairs. Immediately after, the private elevator indicator started rising rapidly, finally stopping at 16. Ding! The doors opened. A powerful aura rushed out. Out walked a man of about 50, wearing a perfectly tailored handmade suit. His hair was combed meticulously. Although there were wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, his gaze was still sharp as a hawk's. It was Richard Vance. Behind him followed 4 bodyguards, also in suits, muscles straining against the fabric, looking cold and tough, clearly professionals. Richard swept his gaze across the empty corridor, finally fixing on my half-open suite door. He didn't hesitate, walking straight toward me. High-end leather shoes struck the floor with a steady, powerful clack-clack, each step like it was stomping on a heart. He didn't knock. He pushed the door open and entered. The 4 bodyguards stayed outside, standing like 4 gatekeepers, sealing off the space. The moment he entered, his eyes landed on me. It was the look of a superior assessing an inferior, carrying undisguised contempt and evaluation. He saw my old coat, saw my cloth shoes stained with mud, and the disdain in his eyes deepened. "You're Jack Miller?" He spoke, his voice identical to what I heard on the phone, full of condescending arrogance. I didn't get up. I didn't even put down the tablet in my hand. I just lifted my eyelids and looked at him. "You're Richard Vance?" I countered with the same question. My calm and disregard clearly irritated him. He was used to everyone bowing and scraping before him. "I'll give you 10 minutes. Richard didn't waste words. He pulled a checkbook and a gold pen from his inner pocket. "Name a price. How much to get out of Evelyn's life and obediently hand over your bone marrow." He slammed the checkbook onto the table, as if granting me a final charity. I laughed. I finally looked up, turned off the tablet, stood, and slowly walked up to him. We were close. I could smell his expensive cologne. "Mr. Vance, I think you've misunderstood something." I looked him in the eye, articulating clearly. "First, right now, it's not me who needs your money. It's you who needs my bone marrow to save the bastard you talked about, my son. Second, from the moment I stepped into this hospital, Evelyn and my son have nothing to do with you. The one who needs to get out is you. Third, and most importantly," I extended a finger and tapped lightly on the glaring checkbook in front of him. "Who do you think you are? What gives you the right to bargain with me here? Now, I'm giving you 10 minutes. Think carefully about what attitude you should use to beg me." My voice wasn't loud, but it made Richard's continuously arrogant face instantly turn dark enough to drip water. A flash of ruthlessness crossed his eyes, and the fist at his side quietly clenched. The air solidified in that moment. Richard's face was terrifyingly dark, the anger in his hawk-like eyes almost erupting. "Are you lecturing me?" He squeezed the sentence through his teeth, every word carrying a chill. Since taking charge of the Vance Group, this was the first time anyone dared speak to him this way. In his view, my behavior was no different from an ant provoking a dragon. "I'm not lecturing you. I'm notifying you." I met his gaze calmly, not retreating an inch under his oppressive aura. "Every second you stand here, you are wasting my son's treatment time. My patience, like his life, is limited." My words struck his weak point with precision. Even though he called Ryan a bastard, the boy was Evelyn's son, a vital link in maintaining his alliance with the Sterling family. If Ryan died, Evelyn would go mad, and the relationship between him and the Sterling family would suffer irreparable cracks. He couldn't let Ryan die, at least not now. "Very good." Richard laughed in extreme anger. He nodded slowly, the ruthlessness in his eyes growing thicker. "I admit, I underestimated you. 20 years of country life didn't grind you into a coward. Instead, it grew you a set of reckless thorns. He slowly raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Outside, the 4 bodyguards who stood like statues immediately understood. They pushed into the room in unison, surrounding me. In a small suite, the temperature instantly dropped to freezing. The air was filled with silent threats. Richard sat back on the sofa, crossing his legs, resuming his posture of total control. He picked up the tablet on the table, flipping through it casually, as if watching a play that had nothing to do with him. "Jack, I'll give you one last chance," he said without looking up. In this world, there are many ways to make a person voluntarily do something. For example, breaking your legs so you can't go anywhere, or making you experience what living death means until you cry and beg me to let you donate bone marrow. "Oh, right." He looked up as if remembering something, smiling cruelly at me. "I heard you have an old neighbor in the country who takes good care of you? At that age, they can't handle much trouble." A naked threat. This was his method. When money failed, violence and intimidation were his most handy weapons. I looked at him and suddenly smiled. My laugh wasn't loud, but it made Richard frown. He hated reactions that were outside his control. "Richard, do you think I dare to stand here and challenge you based on nothing but courage?" I shook my head, my smile carrying a trace of pity. "You're wrong. Dead wrong." I pointed to my temple. "I've been stalling here with you not to run my mouth. I was waiting for the hormone levels in my body to reach a peak because of your threats and intimidation." Richard's expression froze. I continued unhurriedly. "I just read a very interesting fact in the literature. A donor must maintain absolute physical and emotional stability before transplant, because intense emotional fluctuations, like extreme anger or fear, cause cortisol and adrenaline to skyrocket. These stress hormones temporarily affect the activity of blood and immune cells. While it might not cause the transplant to fail, it significantly increases the risk of rejection." I spread my hands, looking at him, smiling like a devil. "In other words, if your bodyguards touch me now, the risk of my son's surgery increases. If you beat me half to death, congratulations. You might need to wait a few months for my body to recover and my indicators to stabilize. I just don't know if my son lying in that hospital bed can wait that long." Richard's face changed for the first time. He wasn't a medical expert, but he understood my meaning. I used his stepson's life as a shield for myself. Just as he was wavering and the bodyguard were looking at each other, the suite door was pushed open again. This time, the solemn-faced attending doctor entered. Behind him was a team of hospital security guards in uniform, holding riot gear. "Mr. Vance," the doctor spoke righteously. "This is a hospital. Mr. Miller is our most honored guest and Ryan's only hope. The hospital assumes full responsibility for his safety. Please ask your men to leave immediately. Mr. Vance, please cooperate. Otherwise, we will take forceful measures and call the police." Richard looked at this sudden turn of events, then at my face, which remained unruffled. He finally understood that from the moment I stepped into this hospital, I had set a trap where his money had no use and his force had no place. In this white tower, the rule maker was no longer him. His clenched fist popped with veins. Finally, powerless, he unclenched it. He stared at me dead on. After a long while, he squeezed out a few words. "What do you want?" "What do I want?" I repeated his words, walking slowly up to him, looking down. "I don't want anything." I picked up the checkbook he left on the table, waved it in front of his face, and then, smack, threw it into the trash can. "I just want to tell you, from today on, I call the shots here." My gaze swept over the aggressive bodyguards, then landed back on Richard's iron gray face. "Take your dogs and get out. Until I call for you. Don't let me see you again." Richard stood up abruptly, a terrifying rage erupting from him. In his life, he had never suffered such humiliation. However, looking at the line of security guards ready for combat behind me, and looking in my eyes, calm as an ancient well, yet seemingly seeing through everything, he knew he had lost today, lost miserably. All his power and wealth became a joke in the face of the absolute need to save the son. Good. Jack Miller, he said good twice, pointing at me, his finger trembling with force. "I'll remember you." With that, he didn't spare me another glance. He turned and stormed out of my room with his 4 defeated bodyguards. Watching his retreating figure, the doctor and the security chief breathed a sigh of relief. "Mr. Miller, are you all right?" the doctor asked with concern. "I'm fine." I waved my hand. "Thank you. It's our duty." The doctor wiped the sweat from his forehead. "So, about the surgery." "Notarus. I sat back on the sofa, pouring myself water. The cast isn't all here yet. How can a show start so hastily? The doctor paused, not understanding. I didn't explain. I just closed my eyes and waited quietly. I knew Richard's exit was just the prelude. Evelyn's breakdown was just the intermission. The person who could truly make the decision, the mastermind who directed all this 20 years ago, was about to lose his patience. Sure enough, less than an hour later, my door was knocked on again. This knock was neither light nor heavy, steady and rhythmic. I opened my eyes and said, "Enter." The door opened, and an old man with white hair but a vigorous spirit walked in. He wore a traditional jacket, fingering a string of polished prayer beads, a faint smile on his face. It was none other than Evelyn's father, the founder of the Sterling Group, Arthur Sterling. 20 years ago, this smiling tiger used my family's safety to drive me away. 20 years later, he finally showed his face. Behind him followed a crestfallen Evelyn and a despondent Richard. As soon as Arthur entered, his eyes landed on me. He sized me up for a few seconds, as if assessing the value of an object. "Jack, 20 years later, you've got more backbone than I imagined." He spoke, his voice not loud, but carrying an unquestionable authority. He ignored my reaction, walking up to Evelyn and Richard, snorting coldly. "Two useless idiots. Can't handle a small thing. Making these old bones come out personally." He scolded his daughter and son-in-law like servants. Richard, the CEO who dominated outside, didn't dare lift his head in front of him. After scolding them, Arthur pulled up a chair and sat opposite me. He placed the prayer beads on the table, looked at me, his smile deepening. "All right, the idlers are quiet. Now the two of us can talk like adults." He paused, poured himself tea, and took a slow sip. "Name your conditions. As long as I can do it, and it's reasonable, I can satisfy you. But my patience is limited too. Ryan's illness can't wait." He adopted a strictly business, ready to close the deal posture, as if everything I did before was just child's play, and now was the real adult negotiation. I looked at his wrinkled, but still shrewdly calculating face, and suddenly laughed. I didn't state any conditions. Instead, I asked him a question. "Mr. Sterling, do you know how I spent my first year after leaving the city?" Arthur paused, clearly not expecting this question. I didn't wait for his answer, speaking on my own. I had less than $200 on me. To save money, I lived in the cheapest basement and ate 2 steam buns a day. In the dead of winter, without heat, I wrapped myself in all my clothes, shivering through the night. Once I had a high fever, burning up, thinking I was going to die. Lying in bed, all I could think about was Evelyn and the child in her belly. My voice was calm, as if telling someone else's story. But every word drained the color further from Arthur's face, and from Evelyn behind him. I wonder back then, do you high and mighty rich people ever dream? In the dead of night, do you ever feel a shred of guilt for what you've done? I looked up, staring straight at Arthur. "So, don't talk to me about adult ways. The debt you owe me from these 20 years, today we calculate it, principal and interest. My first condition isn't for money, nor revenge. It's for fairness." I stood up, walked to Arthur, and spoke clearly. "I want you and Richard Vance to publish a statement in the papers admitting Ryan is my biological son. Then you two will legally, permanently relinquish guardianship of Ryan. From now on, his last name is Miller, not Sterling and not Vance. His life will be taken over entirely by me, his biological father." My words were like a heavy hammer, smashing into Arthur's heart. The breezy smile on his face finally froze. Relinquish guardianship? Change his name to Miller? This wasn't just a matter of face. It was publicly admitting that the Sterling and Vance families had raised a child for 20 years only to hand him over to someone else. More importantly, Ryan, the bond connecting the two families, will be severed. Richard's face changed drastically. He instinctively started to object, but Arthur silenced him with a severe glare. Arthur stared at me, his cloudy eyes flashing with calculation. He was rapidly assessing the pros and cons, and my resolve. "Jack, you are gambling with Ryan's life out of spite," he said slowly, his tone turning dark. "For your pitiful pride, you'd let your own son die." He started pinning blame, trying to occupy the moral high ground to pressure me. It was his favorite trick. Spite. I laughed. "Mr. Sterling, you still don't get it. I'm not acting out of spite. I'm saving him. Saving him from his family full of lies, filth, and cold-bloodedness. Look at your daughter and son-in-law behind you. Look at that child in the hospital bed. What did you give him in 20 years? A rich material life? And then you let him live inside a massive lie, not even knowing his own father. When he got sick, his so-called father called him a bastard, and his so-called brother had no brotherly love for him." My voice rose, Everywhere a knife into the Sterling family's heart. Does a family like this deserve him? Do you think if Ryan were awake right now, who would he choose? Arthur was struck speechless. Evelyn had collapsed into Richard's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Young man, don't be too arrogant. Arthur took a deep breath, forcibly suppressing his emotions, trying one last effort. Leave a bridge, so we can cross it later. Burning bridges benefits neither you nor Ryan. I can give you a sum of money, enough for you and Ryan to live in luxury forever. We can share guardianship. This was the biggest concession he could make. Money. I sneered. Do you think I care about your dirty money now? I walked to the glass window of the ward, looking at the quiet figure inside. Arthur, 20 years ago, I couldn't beat you because I had nothing, and you controlled everything of mine. But today is different. I have nothing to lose. My life is cheap, but this cheap life is tied to your precious grandson's life. And you, with your great empire, have too much you can't afford to lose. I turned around, picked up a document prepared on the table, and threw it in front of Arthur. It was an agreement drafted by a lawyer regarding the transfer of guardianship and a trust. The terms were clear, logic tight, no loopholes. These are my total conditions. They're all there. Besides guardianship, you must repay what you owe Ryan for these 20 years. I want the Vance and Sterling families to each contribute 10% of their group shares into a trust fund with Ryan, Chinyang, as the sole beneficiary. This fund will be managed by a third-party institution I designate. You have no right to interfere. 10% of the shares. As soon as this condition came out, Richard and Arthur stopped breathing. This wasn't just cutting flesh. This was digging out their hearts. 10% of Sterling and Vance groups. That was an astronomical figure, enough to cripple any family, even shake their foundations. You're crazy. Richard finally roared. This is extortion. Blackmail. Call it what you want. I couldn't be bothered to waste words with him, staring only at the darkened face of Arthur. My conditions are here. Sign or don't sign. You decide. I lifted my wrist, checking a watch that wasn't there. The doctor told me tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. is the best time for the final pre-op checks. If I don't see the signed agreement by 8 a.m., the surgery is canceled. Don't say I didn't give you a chance. With that, I ignored them, walked straight back into my suite, and slammed the door shut in their faces. Bang! I threw the decision back to them like a hot potato. I knew from this moment on, the ones truly suffering were them. Inside the room, I leaned against the door and exhaled a long breath. 20 years of suppression and humiliation found a vent today. I took out my phone, scrolled through the data the doctor gave me, and found a number. It was the contact for a psychological intervention specialist. I dialed. Hello, is this Dr. Miles? I'm Jack Miller, VIP Ward 16. Yes, I'd like to book some time. I want to ask about a young man surrounded by family lies who suddenly suffers a major illness. After waking up, what psychological issues might he have? And, as his father, how can I help him rebuild his life? Outside, the night was deep. My revenge had just begun, but my redemption was also quietly underway. That door separated two worlds. Outside was the doomsday judgment for Arthur, Evelyn, and Richard. Inside was the peace of controlling my own destiny for the first time in 20 years. I didn't eavesdrop on the arguments, breakdowns, and weighing of pros and cons outside, because the result was foreordained. When one person relies on another to live, all dignity, wealth, and power are just bubbles. I leaned back on the sofa, closing my eyes, but my mind raced. I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore, but about how to face the young man who was nominally my son, but actually a stranger after the surgery succeeded. How should I tell him the truth of these 20 years? How should I heal the trauma of being used as a bargaining chip and shame by two families? How could I make him accept me, a poor biological father who appeared out of nowhere? These questions were far more complex and heavy than extorting shares from Richard. I picked up the phone again, reviewing the materials sent by the psychologist. It said that for young people who have suffered such major changes, rebuilding trust and self-identity is the first and hardest step. This process requires great patience, sincerity, and love. Love. This word made me dazed. 20 years of lonely life had made my heart as rough and hard as the whetstone in my yard. I didn't know if I still had the capacity to give love. Time passed in silence. I could hear suppressed arguing in the hallway. Richard's rage, Evelyn's sobbing, and Arthur's aged but forceful scolding. They were like beasts trapped in a cage, tearing at each other, finding no exit. I don't know how long it passed, maybe 3 hours, maybe 4. The voices outside finally died down completely, followed by a deathly silence. I knew they had made their choice. A while later, hurried footsteps approached. Men looking like lawyers carrying briefcases were led to the conference room next door. An all-night negotiation about the division of property and power was being hammered out word by word in the room next to me. I didn't pay attention. I opened the tablet and searched for the best rehabilitation hospitals in New York and the best nutritionists. From the moment they signed, my identity was no longer an avenger. I was just a father who was 20 years late, clumsily learning how to love his son. When the sky turned pale, there was a light knock on my door. It was the attending doctor. He had dark circles under his eyes, clearly having not slept all night, but his expression carried a relaxed relief. "Mr. Miller." He handed me a glass of warm milk. "Mr. Sterling and the others have agreed to all your conditions. The legal team is doing the final text confirmation, guaranteeing the signed documents will be in your hands before 8 a.m. I nodded, took the milk, and said thanks. Also, the doctor paused, tone complicated. "Ms. Sterling, Evelyn wants to see you before the surgery. She promises just a few words." I stopped drinking and looked at him. "Tell her that between her and me, aside from that agreement, there is nothing to say. Whatever she wants to say, apologies, confessions, or playing the family card, it's worthless to me. I agreed to save him not because I forgave her, but because the person in that bed is my son. My patience is reserved only for my son. As for them, I put down the glass, voice cold, sign the papers, take the result they want, and then disappear from my world completely. 7:50 a.m., 10 minutes before my deadline. The suite door was knocked on again. I walked over and opened it. Standing there was Arthur Sterling. Overnight, this formally imposing old man seemed to have aged 10 years. His eyes were sunken, face exhausted, leaning on a dragon-head cane, body trembling slightly as if he might fall any moment. Behind him stood two solemn lawyers holding a thick stack of documents. Richard and Evelyn did not appear. I guess they probably didn't have the face to see me right now. "Here is what you want." Arthur's voice was hoarse and dry. He pointed his cane at the files. "The transfer agreements for 10% of Sterling and Vance Groups respectively, the guardianship change declaration for Ryan, and the legal documents severing all ties between our parties. All documents are notarized and effective immediately." A lawyer stepped forward, respectfully handing the documents to me. I didn't take them immediately. Instead, I picked up a pair of white gloves I had placed on the table by the door and put them on slowly. This action made the corner of Arthur's eye twitch violently. I picked up the files, flipping through them page by page. Every clause, every number, every signature, I checked with utmost seriousness. My calm and composure contrasted sharply with Arthur's suppressed humiliation. At the other end of the hall, the doctors and nurses were waiting with the gurney, everyone holding their breath for my final decision. Time felt incredibly long. Finally, I closed the last document. All terms were exactly as I demanded. In some details to expedite the process, they had even made greater concessions. Good. I took off the gloves and handed the stack, heavy as a mountain to me, representing shame and massive loss to them, to my lawyer waiting nearby. This lawyer, Ross, was one of New York's top commercial attorneys whom I had contacted in the middle of the night. When he got my call, he thought it was a prank until I rattled off several internal details about the Vance and Sterling groups. He had jumped out of bed and rushed to the hospital. Ross checked them quickly, nodded to me, confirming everything was in order. I turned to Arthur. He was staring at me, a look that wanted to swallow me whole. "Mr. Sterling, pleasure doing business." Arthur swayed violently, his cane hitting the ground hard. He opened his mouth, seeming to want to say something harsh, but ultimately, it turned into a long sigh full of unwillingness and defeat. "Jack, you win." He closed his eyes, seeming to use all his strength. "I hope you won't regret this later." "Regret?" I smiled. "My biggest regret is not slapping myself awake 20 years ago when I was blinded by love. As for today, every decision I made justifies the suffering of the last 20 years. I ignored him, turning to the doctor. "Doctor, I'm ready." "Right away, Mr. Miller." The doctor looked like he'd been granted amnesty, immediately directing nurses to help me onto the gurney. As the gurney was pushed forward, I passed Arthur. We brushed shoulders. This man who once controlled my fate and crushed me like an ant now stood there like a bystander. Watching me move toward the room he couldn't reach no matter what he tried. I knew from this moment, all grievances between us ended with that agreement. The wheels of the gurney rolled forward. An era ended. Another era, belonging to me and my son, was about to begin. The second before I was pushed into the OR and the anesthesiologist put the mask on my face, the last thought in my mind was, "Ryan, don't be afraid. Dad is here." The bone marrow harvesting process felt like a long yet short dream. Under general anesthesia, I felt no pain, my consciousness drifting on a warm ocean. I could vaguely sense doctors working, hear the beeping of machines, but it was all far away. My mind was clearer than ever. I saw myself 20 years ago, young and naive, smiling foolishly while helping Evelyn with her makeup. I saw the figure in the rain, kicked out, leaving the city alone and wretched. I saw myself in the broken country cabin, eating 2 cold buns on Christmas Eve, yet still fantasizing about bringing my wife and child home one day. Scene by scene, frame by frame, the painful, humble, unwilling past I had buried deep in my memory flashed before my eyes. But this time, there was no hate in my heart, no sorrow, only a sense of release, as if an invisible force was extracting the heaviness and gloom accumulated over 20 years along with my marrow. Replacing it was a feeling of rebirth, full of hope and strength. I was fighting for a life, fighting for my son. This feeling made me feel incredibly grounded. I don't know how much time passed before a nurse gently woke me. Mr. Miller. The surgery went smoothly. How do you feel? I slowly opened my eyes. The white ceiling came into view. My lower back throbbed with a dull ache, but it was entirely bearable. My son, I asked, voice raspy. Don't worry, the stem cell activity is excellent. It's already been infused into Ryan. The next 48 hours are critical. As long as there's no severe rejection, the surgery is a success. The nurse adjusted my foredrip while whispering comfort. I nodded, a weight lifting from my heart. I turned to look out the window. It was dark. The surgery had taken the whole afternoon. Where are the others? I asked. The nurse paused, realizing who I meant. Her expression turned awkward. Oh, they left a while ago. Shortly after your surgery started, Mr. Sterling and the others left. Left? I was slightly surprised, but then understood. For them, staying here meant nothing but added embarrassment and humiliation. They had paid the terrible price and got the result they wanted. The rest was up to doctors and fate. I see. I closed my eyes to rest. Exhaustion washed over me like a tide, but my spirit was high. For the next 2 days, strictly following doctor's orders, I rested in bed. My constitution was strong, and I recovered quickly. During this time, Dr. Miles, the psychologist, visited once. We talked for a long time. He gave me much professional advice on how to communicate with a young man who had suffered physical and mental trauma, how to guide him out of the shadows. I memorized every word. On the morning of the 3rd day, I was finally allowed to walk. The first thing I did was go to the viewing window of the sterile isolation ward. Through the thick glass, finally for the first time, I clearly saw my son, Ryan. He lay quietly on the bed, still pale, but with a hint of color compared to days ago. The curves and numbers on the monitors beside him were steady and strong. The attending doctor stood beside me, tone full of joy. Mr. Miller, it's a miracle, a medical miracle. Ryan's body shows no rejection of your cells. The integration is perfect. His vitals are recovering at an astonishing speed. In a few days, he can move to a regular room. My eyes instantly dampened. I reached out, gently pressing against the cold glass as if I could touch him. Just then, Ryan's finger on the bed moved slightly. Immediately after, his long eyelashes began to tremble. He was waking up. My heart leaped into my throat. The doctor noticed too, immediately excitedly calling nurses to prepare. Under our gaze, Ryan slowly opened his eyes. They were clear, but full of confusion. He looked at the strange ceiling, then at the tubes and himself, eyes full of bewilderment. His gaze moved slowly, finally locking with mine outside the glass. Eyes met. My heart skipped a beat. His lips moved slightly, seeming to want to say something, but no sound came out. I looked at him, suppressing my excitement, and gave him a smile, perhaps stiff, but absolutely the most sincere, warmest smile I had given in 20 years. I mouthed 2 words to him. Hello. So, Ryan woke up. The news spread like wine through the floor. Doctors and nurses rushed into the sterile room for checks. I was politely asked back to my suite, the reason being the patient was emotionally and physically fragile and couldn't handle external stimulation. I understood, so I didn't insist. I sat on the sofa, heart suspended in midair. I didn't know what he would think, waking up to see strangers in white coats instead of his mother or brother. I didn't know how he would react when he learned his origin and how he was saved. Dr. Miles's words echoed. Mr. Miller, remember, for someone whose worldview is shattered, any rushed truth is secondary trauma. You need to guide and accompany, not just inform. Guide and accompany. I chewed on these words, feeling lost. I was a lonely man who lived in the woods for 20 years. I knew how to deal with dirt and wood, but not how to accompany a traumatized son. The long checks finally ended. The doctor came to update me, joy unconcealed. Mr. Miller, great news. Ryan's condition is better than expected. Clear consciousness, logical thinking. He asked about his family. The doctor's expression turned unnatural. My heart sank. What did he ask? He asked why his mom and brother weren't here. We followed your instructions and said they had urgent business and left temporarily. I nodded. I see. Can I see him? Of course, but keep it short, 10 minutes max. And please control your emotions. Understand? Guided by the nurse, I scrubbed in, donned the sterile suit, and finally stepped into the room. Ryan was propped up, looking out the window. The New York nightscape was brilliant, but his eyes were hollow. Hearing the door, he turned slowly. His gaze landed on me, scanning me from head to toe, full of scrutiny and distance. "Who are you?" He spoke, voice raspy like sandpaper. My prepared opening lines stuck in my throat. I looked at his pale, handsome face, eyes 7 parts like mine were when I was young. I took a deep breath, walked to his bedside, and pulled down my mask. "My name is Jack Miller." I tried to sound gentle. "I am your father." The air solidified. Ryan's pupils contracted. He looked at me in disbelief, a flash of absurd ridicule crossing his face, followed by deep vigilance and anger. "My dad is Richard Vance," he articulated, defending his last dignity. "Who are you? Did my mom hire you to act? Get out." He got agitated, triggering a coughing fit. I stepped forward to help, but he swatted me away. "Don't touch me," he growled like a wounded cub. My hand froze in midair. I wasn't angry, just heartbroken. I stepped back to a safe distance and pulled my mask back up. "Rest well," I said softly. "When you're better, I'll tell you everything. Right now, just know you're safe. No one will hurt you again." My calm seemed to surprise him. He stopped coughing, staring at me with complicated eyes. I didn't say more, nodded to him, and left. 10 minutes were up. Walking out, I leaned against the cold corridor wall, feeling deeply powerless. The first step was so hard. The doctor followed me. "Mr. Miller, don't worry. Emotional instability is normal." He paused. "By the way, Evelyn called again asking about Ryan. She wants." "Tell her," I interrupted coldly. "The patient is fine but doesn't want to see her. From now on, refuse all calls and visits from their family. My son's life, starting now, has nothing to do with them." Over the next few days, Ryan improved daily. He moved to the VIP suite next to mine. Tubes were removed. He could walk around. His body recovered, but his heart built a wall. He didn't speak to me, didn't look at me. When I entered, he looked away or feigned sleep. He was like a silent clam, rejecting the world. He barely ate the hospital food. Nurses failed, doctors failed. I watched him waste away, anxious. "Dr. Miles said, heart sickness needs heart medicine, but the body is the capital. To get him out of the shadow, he needs a healthy body." That night, I dismissed the private nurse and decided to care for him myself. Following the nutritionist's recipe, I entered the private kitchen. For a man who used a wood stove for 20 years, the shiny German appliances were terrifying. I clumsily washed and chopped. I wanted to make vegetable soup, but either added too much water or burned the bottom. After an hour, I finally brought a decent bowl of soup into his room. He was reading, didn't look up. "Doctor said you didn't eat dinner. Have some soup. It's good for the stomach." I placed it on the nightstand. He didn't react. I didn't push. I pulled up a chair, sat nearby, and quietly read my leukemia recovery care guide. Only the turning pages and traffic outside broke the silence. We sat in a silent standoff. A while later, I heard a sound. Peripheral vision showed him putting down the book, hesitantly picking up the lukewarm soup and drinking small spoonfuls. My heart felt soaked in warm water. He drank slowly, but finished it. He put the bowl back, didn't look at me, and resumed reading. But I knew the wall in his heart had a hairline crack. From that day, I cooked for him daily. Noodle soup, fish broth. My skills improved. I never forced him to eat, never forced conversation. I just prepared food, sat quietly while he read, and handed him water when nightmares woke him. I spoke little, did much. I used the only way I learned in 20 years, clumsy, sincere, to send a message. "I am here. I won't leave." Half a month passed. Ryan was basically recovered. Discharge was tomorrow. That night, I brought a late-night snack. He suddenly put down his book and looked at me. This was the first time he looked me in the eye. His gaze was complex, inquiry, confusion, and a trace of reliance he didn't notice. His voice wasn't raspy anymore. "You're so good to me. Is it out of guilt?" I froze. I didn't expect that question. I was silent for a long time, then shook my head. No. I look him in the eye. Before, I thought I did this to prove something to them, to get justice. But watching you come out of surgery, watching you get better, I realized. I took a breath, tone solemn. I do this for one reason. Because I'm your father, and you're my son. It has nothing to do with anyone else or debt. It's just instinct. Ryan was stunned. Instinct unlocked the softest, most confused part of him. Growing up, everything was conditional. Richard's coldness, Evelyn's guilt-ridden love, Tyler's exclusion. All transactions. He was a pawn. He had never felt this unconditional, pure care. His eyes reddened. But you don't know me. 20 years. You weren't there. Yes, I missed your 20 years. That's my life's biggest regret. So I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I sat by his bed, meeting his eyes levelly. Ryan, I know you have questions, resentment. Tonight, ask anything. I'll tell you everything. No holding back. He looked at me, lips moving, finally asking the question haunting him. My mother. Why did she do that? If I'm your son, why did she lie? Why marry? Richard Vance. His voice was light but heavy on my heart. I didn't embellish or villainize. I told the story of 20 years ago, simply, from our love to Arthur's opposition, the gala, the pregnancy with twins by different fathers, her desperation to save the family and the babies, forcing her to marry Richard and push me away cruelly. I was calm, but Ryan shook. He finally understood. Why he was sickly and Tyler strong. Why Richard ignored him. Why Tyler looked down on him. Why Evelyn looked at him with that thick mix of love and pain. His world, his 20 years, was built on a lie. And he was the biggest sacrifice. So, I was a mistake from birth. Trouble, he muttered, face pale, smiling uglily. No, I interrupted firmly. You are the only innocent victim in this story. The mistake wasn't yours. It was the adults blinded by desire and power. Me, Evelyn, Richard, Arthur. We all sinned, but let you bear the consequences alone. My words shattered his last defense. He lost control, grabbing a pillow and smashing it against the wall. Why? Why me? He screamed hysterically, tears bursting like a dam. What gave him the right to decide my life? Why? He cried like a child, venting 20 years of grievance and anger. I didn't stop him. He sat quietly. The poison had to come out. He cried until his voice was hoarse, until no tears were left. He curled up, helpless. I walked over, gently brushing the wet hair from his forehead. He didn't dodge. Ryan, I said, you couldn't choose your past. But starting tomorrow, you can. Tomorrow, you're discharged. I contacted a rehab center in Switzerland. We can go there, start over. Or if you want to stay, I bought a house with a yard upstate. We can plant vegetables, live simply. You can even choose to continue your wealthy life. The trust money is enough for lifetimes. I won't decide for you. I'll just tell you whatever road you choose, I'll walk with you, using my second half of life to make up for missing your first. I gave him every choice except a loan. He looked up, red eyes full of confusion, but a faint light appeared deep within. Hope. He looked at me for a long time, asking a question with a thick nasal voice. A question marking the end of the past. Can we really leave tomorrow? Early the next morning, I handled the discharge. No flowers, no send-off. The doctor and nurses saw us to the elevator. Mr. Miller, Ryan, take care. I shook hands. Ryan stood silently behind me. He was used to silence. But today's silence wasn't cold. It was lost. The elevator doors closed. Just the two of us. I held a simple bag with his clothes. We had nothing else, like two people appearing out of thin air. He wore a tracksuit I bought. Plain but clean. Contrast to his past designer wear. He tugged the hem, and used to it. In the garage, my lawyer Ross waited by a black Volkswagen. Mr. Miller, all set. I nodded. Ryan got in. We drove into New York traffic. Sunlight hit the window. Ryan blocked it, staring out. It was his city for 20 years, now strange. Skyscrapers, ads, elites. His former world now looked like a distant dream. He saw the Vance Tower. He stared at it, eyes empty. I didn't disturb him. I knew he needed time to say goodbye to his past. The car headed north, leaving the city center. Concrete turned to green. An hour later, we stopped at a quiet house in a nice town. We're here, Ross said. Detached, big yard, quiet neighbors. I nodded. Ryan got out, looking at the white two-story house. It was new, pretty, but compared to his past palaces, simple. But that simplicity relaxed him. I unlocked the gate. The smell of grass and earth hit us. Fruit trees, a small pond with koi. Like it? I asked. He didn't answer, following me inside. Warm wood tones, comfortable furniture. Sunlight flooded the room. No cold marble. It felt like a home. I rolled up my sleeves. Look around. I'll make food. To celebrate. Moving in. He stood in the living room, watching me in the kitchen, watching the yard. Finally, he sat on the soft sofa. He closed his eyes and exhaled deeply. It was his first active choice. Life began in monotonous peace. I gardened. He sat on the porch watching, curious eyes exploring a new world. We spoke little, but a tacit understanding grew. He stopped resisting my food. Once, eating chicken soup, he whispered, a bit salty. I laughed. Okay, less salt next time. The ice was melting, but peace was broken. That afternoon, a red Ferrari screeched to a halt outside. Evelyn stepped out, haggard in Chanel. She rang the doorbell frantically. Ryan froze on the porch. He knew. I opened the door. Ryan. My Ryan. Evelyn tried to rush in, tears flowing. I blocked her. Ms. Sterling, the agreement is clear. You aren't welcome. Jack, move. I'm seeing my son. She pounded my chest. Your son. I sneered. Your son is Tyler at the Vance house. My son is Ryan Miller. Nothing to do with you. My words stabbed her. She stepped back, looking at Ryan, begging. Ryan, talk to mommy. I was wrong. Come home. I'll give you everything. Ryan put down his book. He stood up. No te has, no anger. He walked to my side. He looked at me, voice firm. Dad, I'm tired. I want to rest. He nodded to me, turned, walked inside, and shut the door. Dad, a turn. The simplest, most absolute rejection. The world went quiet. Evelyn stood there, realizing she had lost him forever. She collapsed, wailing, dignity gone. I ignored her, locking the gate. Outside was her collapsed world. Inside was our new life. Security eventually removed her. The Ferrari lingered like a bleeding wound, then vanished. Inside, Ryan stood by the window. I poured him water. Thanks. Hungry? I asked naturally. He shook his head. Dad, was I cruel? I looked at him. No, you're protecting yourself. Today, you made an adult choice. He drank the water slowly. That night, we had tomato egg noodles. Fresh tomatoes from the yard. He ate a lot. After dinner, Ross called. Mr. Miller, big news. Vance and Sterling groups are in chaos. Oh, rivals are shorting the stock because of the share transfer. Plus internal strife. Richard Vance is being ousted for embezzlement, facing investigation. Ross sounded excited. I see. My reaction was flat. Their fate didn't matter anymore. About your shares. Liquidate them. I interrupted. Cash. Put some in Ryan's trust. Start a leukemia charity with another part. Keep enough for us to live. Ross paused. Mr. Miller, you are the most remarkable man I've met. Remarkable? I hung up, looking at the moon. I smiled self-deprecatingly. I was just a father who made mistakes and wanted to spend the rest of his life making amends. Days later, the garden was lush. I was hoeing. Ryan sat beside me with a gardening book, awkwardly handing me tools. The sun was warm. Everything was peaceful. Daddy asked suddenly, what are those? I looked. A patch I seeded days ago. Tiny yellow buds were poking out. Sunflowers, I smiled. Sunflowers? Yeah, I grew them back at the cabin. Hard to kill. As long as there's sun, they survive. And they always face the light. I straightened up, wiping sweat. I put a packet of leftover seeds in his hand. Want to try? He looked at the seeds, then at my expectant eyes. He hesitated, then nodded heavily. He copied me, digging a small hole, placing a seed, covering it. He looked up, face smudged with dirt like a kitten. His eyes reflected the summer sun, incredibly bright. Dad. He looked at the earth where he buried hope. Will it really bloom? I smiled, ruffling his hair. It will. As long as we care for it, as long as there is sun, it will bloom into the most beautiful flower in the world. Story complete.